A leap into futuristic space combat hasn't breathed a lot of new life into Call of Duty. With a scenic but poorly paced single-player campaign, and multiplayer and zombies modes that succeed mostly by sticking close to what Black Ops 3 did last year, Infinite Warfare is a generally fun but inessential shooter. The sci-fi campaign spends 2/3 of its 5.5 hours getting warmed up before it finally hits its stride. After a cold open that evokes old-school Call of Duty melodrama, Infinite Warfare places you in the shoes of a Navy pilot with so much Top Gun swagger I half expected a volleyball scene.
Call the flight deck, I'll go out there myself.
The battle against Game of Thrones' Kit Harington and his cartoonishly freedom-hating Settlement Defense Front
We will not fail.
is fought across the solar system on foot, in a space fighter, and in a space suit. It's a good attempt to present Call of Duty as more than just a linear series of corridor shootouts, but the pacing suffers from too many fights against bullet-spongy armored enemies and stingy use of the best weapons. In space missions, dogfights wrest a lot of control away from you, making each one feel much like the last. And with no minimap in your ship or out of it, it's annoyingly tough to tell where you're being attacked from in space. Worse, loading screens are hidden by the longest and most boring elevator rides since Mass Effect. By the time things really get going, there's only about an hour or so left to play through. Similar to Black Ops 3 in all the right ways, with a Pick-10 loadout system complemented by specialist-like rigs and a focus on mobility, Infinite Warfare's fast-paced multiplayer is obviously its strongest mode. There are lots of interesting ways to customize your class that can surprise your enemies. With a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling, it's both accessible and rewarding. The map design uses the science fiction setting to great effect, taking you and your opponents to levels with gorgeous backdrops from around the solar system. With mobility a critical focus, Infinite Warfare is very rigid in the way it defines wall running opportunities, which can create problems if you're coming from other high mobility shooters. Only certain walls or certain parts of walls can be used, and the maps aren't clear in defining which are which. It encourages map knowledge to both traverse correctly and know how to take down flanking wall runners, but it feels too set in stone and turns wall runs into their own type of corridor. Nevertheless, levels are at their best when they're wide open, allowing you to leap, slide, and wall run around like you're in an old-school arena shooter. When they're closed off, they give way to shotgun spamming ambushes, and your ability to deal with players who spawn behind you becomes complicated. Those spawn problems plague Infinite Warfare, but they will hopefully improve over time. Another area that needs improvement is the networking. Infinite Warfare has put me on peer-to-peer hosted servers far too often, causing all manner of frustrating lag and sync issues.
Set phasers to fun.
Zombies in Spaceland is a gem, though not quite as strong as the more built-out version we saw in Black Ops 3. Set in an abandoned theme park and hosted by a maniacal David Hasselhoff, it's a little too goofy at times when it should be menacing. Nevertheless, it still has the same cooperative magic as you solve the many puzzles of the park while fighting off waves of exploding clowns and zombified parkgoers. Clever, looping map design and thematically appropriate traps turn each new game into a learning experience as you discover all the intricacies of the park. There's even an inspired way of earning new lives by playing carnival games when you die. There's a massive amount of content in Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, though, especially if you played Black Ops 3 last year, there's little of it that's particularly impressive. The campaign is ignorable, and the multiplayer needs a little technical work to be as good as last year's. But the overly silly zombies mode keeps me coming back. It may not stand out in a year that's been crowded with great shooters, but it still produces that familiar Call of Duty action. For more on Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, watch the first 15 minutes of the campaign, zombies gameplay, or see all 13 multiplayer maps right here on IGN.